I'm Elena Navarro, 24 years old. Until 3 months ago, I believed family meant having your back no matter what. Then my eviction notice changed everything. I was devastated, confused, and completely blindsided. My mother's words still echo in my mind. Mija, Mateo needed the car more than he needed that apartment. What they didn't know was that I had been working 60-hour weeks for 6 months, sending them money I couldn't afford while barely scraping together my own rent. I thought I was behind on payments because of my own mistakes, but the truth was so much worse. My parents had co-signed my lease without telling me, and when my brother wanted a shiny new Camaro, they simply stopped making their portion of the payments. How do you forgive the people who were supposed to protect you when they throw you away for someone else's comfort? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I should probably start from the beginning, before everything fell apart. My name is Elena Navarro, and I'm the daughter of Mexican immigrants who sacrificed everything to give their children a better life. At least, that's what I always believed, growing up in a cramped 2-bedroom house on Chicago's South Side. I learned early that being the oldest meant being the responsible one. While my younger brother Mateo got to be the charming, carefree kid who could do no wrong, I was the one helping mom with dinner after school, translating documents for dad and making sure homework got done. Not that I minded, family is family. Right? My parents, Carmen and Luis Navarro, worked tirelessly. Mom cleaned offices downtown, leaving before dawn and returning exhausted after dark. Dad spent his days at a metal fabrication plant, his hands permanently stained with grease, and his back perpetually aching. They spoke often about El Sueño Americano, the American dream, and how everything they did was for Mateo and me. I excelled in school because I had to. There was never a question that I'd go to college. It was an expectation wrapped in love and sacrifice. Mija, Mom would say, stroking my hair as I studied at the kitchen table, you're going to be somebody important. You're going to make us proud. And I did make them proud, at least for a while. I graduated high school as valedictorian, earned a partial scholarship to the University of Illinois Chicago, and majored in graphic design. The day I graduated college, I saw tears in both my parents' eyes. Dad, who rarely showed emotion, hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Mija, la primera en la familia, he whispered. My daughter, the first in the family. That photo from graduation day still sits on their mantle, all 4 of us beaming, me in my cap and gown. Mateo looking genuinely happy for me, Mom and Dad flanking us with expressions of pure pride. We looked like the perfect immigrant success story. The photo doesn't show what happened next. College debt was real, even with scholarships. I graduated with $35,000 in student loans and a degree in a competitive field, while my classmates moved back home. To figure things out, I felt pressure to prove that the investment in my education was worth it. I needed to be independent, successful, self-sufficient, the daughter who justified all those years of sacrifice. I found a 1-bedroom apartment in Pilsen, close enough to visit family, but far enough to feel like an adult. The rent was $1,100 a month, which was manageable if I worked 2 jobs and freelanced on weekends. It wasn't glamorous. The radiator clanged all night. The neighbors upstairs had loud arguments in 3 different languages, and the coffee shop downstairs filled my apartment with the smell of burnt espresso every morning, but it was my daughter, so I thought. I worked as a part-time teaching assistant at a local community college, helping adult learners navigate computer design programs. The pay was $15 an hour for 20 hours a week, barely enough to cover groceries, let alone rent. My second job was at a downtown marketing firm, another part-time position doing basic design work for $18 an hour. Between both jobs, freelance, clients, and the occasional graphic design project for local businesses, I was pulling in about $2,200 a month. After taxes, student loan payments, and basic living expenses, I had maybe $200 left over each month. It was tight, but I was making it work, What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was that my parents had co-signed my lease. When I'd applied for the apartment, my credit wasn't strong enough on its own. The landlord, a gruff man named Mr. Kowalski, had looked at my application with skepticism. "You're young, no credit history, 2 part-time jobs," he'd said, shaking his head. "I'm gonna need a co-signer." I called my parents in a panic. "I found a perfect place, but I need someone to co-sign." "Of course, Mija," Mom had said without hesitation. "We'll take care of it." Dad had driven down that weekend, signed the papers, and handed me the keys with a proud smile. "Now you're really on your own," he'd said, "independent like you wanted." Except I wasn't independent at all. Unbeknownst to me, the lease agreement included a clause that made my parents responsible for a portion of the rent if I ever fell behind. They'd been quietly contributing $400 a month to my rent for over a year, money I never knew about, help I never asked for. Meanwhile, Mateo was living his best life at home. At 21, he dropped out of college after 2 semesters, claiming it wasn't for him. While I was grinding through sleepless nights, working multiple jobs, and building a career, he was sleeping until noon, working part-time at a sneaker store and spending his evenings playing video games or hanging out with friends. But Mateo had something I didn't: effortless charm. He could make Mom laugh when she was exhausted, could talk Dad into giving him money for new clothes, could smooth over any conflict with a smile and a joke. He was the baby, the boy, the one who got away with everything. "He's finding himself," Mom would say whenever anyone questioned why a 21-year-old man was still living at home with no real responsibilities. "He's creative, like Elena, he just needs time." I found out later that while I was scraping together rent money and eating ramen for dinner 4 nights a week, my parents were giving Mateo a $200 a weekly allowance. For what? For being their son, apparently. The first sign of trouble came when my landlord called me in January. "Elena, your rent's late," Mr. Kowalski said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "This isn't like you." I was confused. I'd submitted my portion right on time, like I did every month. "I paid on the 1st, just like always." "You paid $700, he said. "Rent is $1,100. That's when I learned about the cosigner arrangement. I called my parents immediately, embarrassed and confused. "Why didn't you tell me you were helping with rent?" "Because you're so prideful, Mija," Mom explained. "You would have said no and we wanted to help. But we're having some tight months right now. Tight months." I accepted that explanation, even though it stung. I picked up extra freelance work, skipped meals, and somehow managed to cover the full rent for February and March. It was brutal. But I was determined to prove I could handle it on my own. What I didn't know was that those tight months had nothing to do with their finances, and everything to do with Mateo's sudden obsession with cars that my brother had decided he needed a car. Not just any car, a brand new Chevrolet Camaro SS he'd seen at a dealership in Schaumburg. Bright red with racing stripes and a V8 engine that could probably be heard from 3 blocks away. The price tag? $42,000 for someone who made maybe $800 a month at his part-time job. But Mateo had always been persuasive, especially with our parents. He'd grown tired of asking friends for rides, tired of taking the bus, tired of not having the independence that a car would provide. Never mind that I'd been taking public transportation for years, or that plenty of people his age managed just fine without a brand new sports car. He launched a campaign that would have impressed any marketing professional. He talked about responsibility, about how having a car would help him find better employment, about how he was ready to take the next step in his life. He printed out articles about young men who turned their lives around after their parents invested in their potential, and my parents, who had always found it impossible to say no to their charming youngest son, began to listen. The decision, I learned later, was made over Sunday dinner in February. Mateo had been extra helpful that day, setting the table without being asked, complimenting Mom's cooking, asking Dad about work with genuine interest. After dessert, he brought up the car again. "I've been thinking," he said, leaning back and his chair with that easy confidence that had gotten him out of trouble his whole life. Elena's doing so well, right? She's got her education, her jobs, her apartment. She's independent now. She doesn't need help anymore. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. They were proud of my independence, proud that their investment in my education was paying off. In their minds, I had achieved the American dream. I was educated, employed, living on my own. I was proof that their sacrifices had been worth it. Mateo, on the other hand, was still figuring things out, still needed guidance, support, investment. And what better way to invest in his future than to help him? Get reliable transportation? The car isn't just for fun, Mateo continued, sensing their interest. It's practical. I could drive you to your appointments, Mom. I could help with errands. And I've already talked to my manager. If I have reliable transportation, he might be able to give me more hours, maybe even full-time. It was a masterful performance. He positioned the car not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Not as something selfish, but as something that would benefit the whole family. And he'd done it by subtly suggesting that I no longer needed their help. The conversation that night, which I only heard about much later, went something like this. We could probably adjust Elena's help for a few months, Mom said slowly. She's been doing so well on her own. She's strong, Dad agreed. She figured it out, she always does. And just like that, my financial support was quietly redirected to fund my brother's dream car. They didn't tell me, of course. They probably told themselves they'd only reduce their help temporarily, just until Mateo got the car and proved he could handle the responsibility. They probably convinced themselves that I'd be fine, that I'd find a way to make up the difference, that this was actually good for me, another opportunity to prove my independence. What they didn't consider was that I'd been hanging on by a thread financially. That $400 a month wasn't extra money I could do without. It was the difference between stability and disaster. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday in April. I was running late for my community college job, grabbing coffee and checking emails. On my phone, when I saw the official envelope taped to my door, at first I thought it was a mistake. I'd paid rent. Maybe not the full amount every month recently, but I'd been communicating with Mr. Kowalski, working out payment plans, staying on top of things. But as I read the legal language, the reality sank in. 3 months behind on rent. Total amount owed $1,200. 30 days to pay in full or vacate the premises. I called the landlord immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. Mr. Kowalski? There's been a mistake. I've been paying rent. Elena, he said, and his voice was kind but firm. You've been paying your portion, but your co-signers haven't contributed anything since January. I've been patient, but I've got bills too. Co-signers, plural, as if there were multiple people responsible for my housing situation that I somehow didn't know about. I don't understand, I said, sinking onto my couch. What co-signers? And that's when he explained the full arrangement. Not only had my parents co-signed the lease, they'd been covering $400 of my monthly rent for over a year. When they stopped contributing, I'd been unknowingly falling further behind each month, even as I'd been paying what I thought was my full share. I hung up and called my parents immediately. Mom answered on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. Elena, how are you, Mija? Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I got an eviction notice. Silence. Then quietly, oh, you haven't been paying the rent supplement since January. More silence. Then, Elena, we need to talk. Can you come over for dinner tonight? That dinner conversation would change everything between us. As I sat in the kitchen where I'd done homework every night throughout high school, where I'd celebrated my college acceptance, where I'd shared countless family meals, my parents explained. Their decision with the kind of gentle certainty that made it impossible to argue. They loved me. They were proud of me. They knew I was strong enough to handle this setback. Mateo, on the other hand, needed their support right now. He was at a crucial point in his life. And this car would give him the independence and confidence he needed to become the man they knew he could be. It's only temporary, Mom assured me, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Once Mateo gets settled with the car, finds better work, we can help you again. Dad nodded, his expression serious but loving. You're different than your brother. Mija, you've always been a fighter. You'll figure this out. But I don't have $1,200, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't have anywhere to go. You can always come home, Mom said quickly. Your room is still here. You can save money, figure out your next steps. Move back home. Give up my independence, my carefully constructed adult life, my sense of self-sufficiency. Also, my brother could drive around in a sports car. That night, I lay in my bed, the bed I might not be sleeping in much longer, and tried to process what had happened. My parents hadn't stopped loving me. They hadn't decided I was worthless. They'd simply made a calculation. Elena is strong. Elena will survive. Elena will figure it out. Mateo needs help more. It was the story of my entire life, condensed into one devastating financial decision. As I stared at the ceiling, listening to my upstairs neighbors argue about something in rapid-fire Spanish, I realized this wasn't just about money or housing. This was about being seen, being valued, being considered worthy of protection and support. This was about a 24-year-old woman discovering that even the people who love you most can throw you away when someone else's needs seem more pressing. I had 30 days to figure out my entire life. 30 days to come up with $1,200. I didn't have or find a new place to live, or swallow my pride and move back into my childhood bedroom. But as I lay there in the dark, something else was stirring inside me. Something I never quite felt before. It wasn't just hurt or anger, it was a quiet, burning determination. Maybe my parents were right about one thing. I was a fighter. But they were about to learn that fighters don't just survive, they find ways to win. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. Not a good plan, necessarily, but a plan nonetheless. I would work more hours, pick up extra freelance projects, maybe sell some belongings, and somehow come up with the $1,200 I needed to avoid eviction. I proved to my parents and to myself that I could handle this crisis without crawling. Back home, I started by calling everyone I'd ever done design work for, practically begging for rush projects. Mrs. Chen, who owned a small restaurant in Chinatown, needed new menus designed. I quoted her a price and asked if she could pay half up front. She agreed, and I had $200 within 2 days. I picked up extra hours at both my jobs, working open to close shifts at the marketing firm and staying late at the community college to help with their summer enrollment materials. I was running on 4 hours of sleep and gas station coffee, but I was making progress. By the end of the first week, I'd scraped together $600. It wasn't enough, but it was something. I called Mr. Kowalski to explain my payment plan. I can give you $600 now, I told him, and I'll have the rest by the end of the month. He was quiet for a long moment. Elena, I like you. You're a good tenant, you're respectful. You keep the place clean, but I've got a mortgage to pay too. If you can't come up with the full amount by the deadline, I'm going to have to proceed with the eviction. I understood. I didn't like it, but I understood. That weekend, I was supposed to go to my parents' house for Sunday dinner, a family tradition we'd maintained even after I moved out. I almost canceled, but something made me go. Maybe I wanted to see how they were handling the situation. Maybe I wanted to give them one more chance to make this right. I should have stayed home. When I walked into the house that had been my childhood sanctuary, the first thing I saw was Mateo lounging on the couch, looking more relaxed and content than I'd seen him in months. He'd always been handsome, dark hair that curled just enough to look effortless, deep brown eyes that sparkled when he smiled, the kind of natural charisma that made people want to be around him. But that day, he had an extra glow about him, like someone who'd just gotten exactly what he wanted. Elena, he called out, jumping up to give me a hug. Perfect timing. I was just about to show Mom and Dad something. Before I could ask what he meant, he was jingling a set of keys in front of my face. Car keys. attached to a black leather fob with a silver Chevrolet logo. Got them yesterday, he said, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Want to see her? I followed him outside in a daze, my parents trailing behind us with expressions of pride and excitement. And there it was, parked in front of our modest house like a glossy red beacon of everything that was wrong with this situation. Brand new Chevrolet Camaro SS Dot. It was beautiful. I had to admit. The paint job was flawless, the chrome details gleamed in the afternoon sun, and even I could appreciate the sleek lines and aggressive stance. This wasn't just transportation, it was a statement. A $42,000 statement. Isn't she gorgeous? Mateo said, running his hand along the hood with something approaching reverence. V8 engine, 455 horsepower, 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. Dad was beaming. He did all the research, negotiated the price himself. Very responsible. Responsible. The word hit me like a physical blow. My brother buying a sports car that cost more than I made in 2 years was responsible, but me asking for help to avoid homelessness was somehow unreasonable. How much are the monthly payments? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. $680, Mateo said proudly. But I got a great interest rate, and Dad co-signed, so wasn't a problem. Dad co-signed. Of course he did. The same man who'd explained to me just a week ago that they couldn't afford to help with my rent had co-signed for a car payment. That was more than half my monthly income. The insurance is a little steep, Mom added, her voice holding just a hint of concern. But we'll help him with that until he gets more hours at work. They'll help him with insurance. But they couldn't help me with rent. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching my family admire the symbol of everything I'd been denied, and felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, crack. Like the first fissure in a dam that's been holding back too much pressure for too long. Elena, what do you think? Mateo asked, genuinely excited to share this moment with me. Want to go for a ride? And that's when it hit. Me, he didn't know. None of them had told him about my eviction notice, about the fact that his car had been purchased with money that should have kept me housed. He was genuinely happy, genuinely proud, genuinely excited to show off his new toy to his big sister. I can't, I said quietly. I have to get home. Are you sure? Mom asked. I made your favorite mole with chicken. My favorite meal made with the kind of love and care that had defined my childhood. The same love that was now being rationed, apparently. I'm sure, I said. I have a lot of work to do. I turned to leave, but Mateo caught my arm. Hey, are you okay? You seem off. I looked at my little brother charming, clueless, beloved Mateo and realized he genuinely cared about my well-being. In his mind, this car didn't have anything to do with me. It was just a separate good thing that had happened to him, unconnected to any bad things happening to me. I'm fine, I lied. Just tired. I drove home in my beat-up Honda Civic, a 10-year-old car I'd bought with my own money after saving for 2 years and tried not to think about the difference between my reliable but aging transportation and my brother's showpiece. But the real gut punch was still coming. That evening, my phone rang. It was Mom. Mija, you left so quickly. Is everything okay? I told you, I'm just tired. I know the situation with the apartment is stressful, she said, her voice taking on that soothing, maternal tone that had comforted me through every childhood crisis. But I want you to know that this car thing with Mateo, it's not about choosing him over you, isn't it? No, Amor. It's about giving each of our children what they need when they need it. Right now, Mateo needs support to become independent. You're already independent. You're already successful. Mom, I'm about to be homeless. You're not going to be homeless. You can always come home. This is just a temporary setback. Temporary setback. As if losing my apartment, my independence, my sense of security was just a minor inconvenience that I'd laugh about someday. You gave him $680 a month for a car payment, I said, my voice harder than I'd ever used with my mother. But you couldn't give me $400 to keep my apartment? Silence. Then, Elena, that's not fair. The car is an investment in his future. The apartment was just helping you with expenses. Just helping me with expenses? As if housing wasn't an investment? In my future, too. Do you hear yourself right now? I asked. Do you hear what you're actually saying? I'm saying that sometimes, as parents, we have to make difficult decisions about how to allocate our resources. Mateo is at a crossroads in his life. This car could be the thing that helps him find direction, motivation, purpose. And what about my direction? What about my motivation? What about my purpose? You already have those things, Mija. You have your education, your career, your independence. You don't need us the way Mateo does. There it was. The truth, spoken plainly and without malice. I was already successful enough that I didn't deserve protection from crisis. Mateo was still struggling enough that he deserved a $42,000 boost. I have to go, I said. Elena, wait. I hung up. I sat in my apartment, my soon-to-be former apartment, and tried to process what had just happened. My family hadn't just chosen my brother over me. They'd done it while convinced they were being fair and reasonable. They'd bought him a sports car while I faced homelessness, and they'd done it with clear consciences because they decided I was strong enough to handle loss, while he was fragile enough to deserve gifts. Telling and preparing this story took. Use a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to this story. But the conversation had revealed something else. Something that cut even deeper than the financial betrayal. My parents saw my independence not as an achievement to be celebrated, but as a reason to withdraw support. The better I did on my own, the less worthy I became of help. Success had made me expendable. I thought about all the times I'd worked double shifts to send money home for family emergencies. The time I'd given Dad $500 to help with car repairs when I could barely afford groceries. The Christmas presents I'd bought for everyone, even when it meant using credit cards I couldn't pay off. The constant, quiet ways I'd tried to contribute to the family to prove I was grateful for everything they'd given me, none of that had earned me consideration when my brother wanted something expensive. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I made a list of every time. I prioritized my family's needs over my own financial stability. Every dollar I'd sent home. Every opportunity I'd passed up because I needed to help with family obligations. Every sacrifice I'd made to be the good daughter, the responsible one, the success story. The list was 3 pages long. By the time I finished writing, it was past midnight. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and facing the same impossible situation I'd woken up with. But something had shifted. The crack in my chest had widened, and through it, I could see something I never noticed before. A life where I mattered as much as everyone else. I picked up my phone and sent a text to my best friend from college, Nia Brooks. We'd lost touch somewhat after graduation. She'd moved to Denver for a marketing job. I'd stayed in Chicago to be close to family. But I knew she'd recently moved back to the city for a better position. Hey, this is random, but do you know of anyone looking for a roommate? Long story, but I need to find a new place ASAP. Her response came within minutes. Girl, what happened? And yes, actually, I just got a 2-bedroom in Logan Square, and I've been looking for someone to split costs. Call me tomorrow. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. Not because my problems were solved, but because someone had responded to my crisis with immediate, practical help instead of lectures about responsibility and strength. I was still going to lose my apartment. I was still going to have to start over. But maybe, just maybe, there was a version of starting over that didn't involve moving back into my childhood bedroom and pretending this betrayal had never happened. Maybe there was a version where I got to keep my dignity. The next morning, I woke up to find another surprise waiting for me. Mateo's car was parked outside my building. I looked out my window and saw him sitting in the driver's seat, apparently waiting for me to emerge. I went downstairs to see what he wanted. Elena, he called out, rolling down the window. I brought breakfast. He held up a bag from our favorite Bakery, the Mexican panaderia where we'd gotten sweet bread every Sunday morning when we were kids. It was a peace offering, wrapped in nostalgia and good intentions. I wanted to talk to you, he said. Mom told me you seemed upset yesterday. Of course she had. But I was curious what version of events she'd shared with him. What did she tell? You? That you're having some money troubles and you're stressed about it. She thinks maybe you're jealous about the car. Jealous. That's what they decided this was about. Not betrayal, not abandonment, not the devastating realization that I mattered less than a set of racing stripes. Just jealousy. I'm not jealous. Of your car, Mateo? I know, he said quickly. I know you're not like that. That's why I wanted to talk to you. If you need help with rent or whatever, I could probably loan you some money. I've been saving up from work. And there it was, the final crushing irony. My baby brother, sweet and clueless and genuinely concerned about my well-being, offering to loan me money to solve a crisis that had been created specifically to fund his luxury purchase. How much have you saved? I asked. About $800. It's not much, but if it would help, $800. He'd saved $800 while living at home rent-free, while receiving a weekly allowance from our parents, while working part-time at a job that required no real responsibility. I've been scrambling to cover basic living expenses, working 2 jobs and freelancing on weekends, slowly drowning in the gap between my income and my actual costs, and he wanted to loan me his savings. Mateo, I said slowly, do you know why I'm having money troubles? Mom said your freelance work has been slow and your jobs don't pay much. Do you know about the co-signer situation? About Mom and Dad helping with my rent? He looked genuinely confused. What do you mean? So they hadn't told him. They'd let him believe that my financial crisis was just bad luck, just the natural struggles of a young adult trying to make it on her own. They'd protected him from the knowledge that his car had cost me my home. I looked at my little brother, the golden child, the beloved son, the one who'd always been shielded from difficult truths, and made a decision. Never mind, I said. Thanks for the offer, but I'll figure it out. Are you sure? I really don't mind. I'm sure. He smiled, relieved. Okay, but if you change your mind, just let me know. And Elena? Whatever's going on, it's going to be fine. You always figure things out. You always figure things out. The family motto applied to me and me alone. As I watched him drive away in his gleaming red Camaro, I realized something important. I was done figuring things out for other people's benefit. I was done being the strong one, the reliable one, the one who'd survive no matter what got taken away from her. It was time to figure things out for myself. Mija Brooks was everything I'd forgotten I needed in my life. When I called her the next morning, she didn't ask for explanations or offer unsolicited advice. She just said, "Can you see the place today?" and gave me an address in Logan Square. The apartment was perfect in a way that felt almost suspicious after weeks of crisis. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, hardwood floors, and most importantly, a lease that didn't require my parents' financial involvement. Mija had already put down the security deposit and first month's rent. She just needed someone to split the ongoing costs. The rent is $1,800 total, she explained as we stood in what would be my new bedroom. So $900 each, plus utilities? I know it's more than you were paying before, but it's perfect, I interrupted. It was $200 more than my current situation, but it was also completely mine. No hidden co-signers, no family strings attached. No one who could pull the rug out from under me without warning. You sure? You haven't even seen the whole place yet. I'm sure. Mija studied me with the kind of direct gaze that had made her a successful marketing manager by age 25. She was tall and striking, with natural hair she wore in a crown, of tight curls and a confidence that seemed to radiate from every pore. We'd been friends in college, bonding over late-night study sessions and shared frustration with professors who didn't take female students seriously. But I'd forgotten how stunning her presence could be. Okay, she said. But I need the full story. Not now, not if you don't want to share yet, but eventually because something tells me there's more going on here than just needing a roommate. I nodded, grateful that she wasn't pushing for immediate explanations. When do you need to move in? Immediately, I said. Like this weekend if possible. Then we better get you packed. That Saturday, Mija showed up at my old apartment with a U-Haul truck, 3 boxes of moving supplies, and a thermos of coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead. She'd also brought reinforcements. Her cousin Marcus, a sweet guy who worked construction and didn't ask questions about why we were moving someone out in a hurry. This is it? Marcus asked, looking around my 1-bedroom apartment. You don't have much stuff. He was right. After 2 years of living paycheck to paycheck, I'd never accumulated much beyond the basics. A bed, a small couch, a desk for my design work, a few bookshelves, and a collection of kitchen essentials. Everything I owned fit into 12 boxes and could be loaded into a truck in 2 hours. Traveling light makes it easier to move, I said, trying to sound philosophical rather than sad about my minimal possessions. As we packed, Mija asked casual questions that gradually extracted the full story of my family situation. She didn't interrupt or offer commentary, just listened while we wrapped my dishes in newspaper and folded my clothes into cardboard boxes. So your parents co-signed your lease, helped pay your rent for over a year, then stopped contributing so your brother could buy a car. She summarized as we loaded the last box into the truck. That's the basic version, yes. And your brother doesn't know any of this? I don't think so. I think they told him I'm just having normal money troubles. Mija shook her head. That's some next-level dysfunction right there. It was the first time anyone had called my family's behavior what it actually was, dysfunctional. Not complicated, not difficult, not a matter of different priorities. Dysfunctional. Maybe I'm overreacting, I said, because part of me still felt guilty for being angry. Maybe they really thought they were doing what was best for everyone. Elena, Mija said, stopping her work to look at me directly. Let me ask you something. If you had the money to help 2 people and one of them was facing homelessness while the other wanted a sports car, which would you choose? That's not exactly. Which would you choose? The person facing homelessness. Right. Because you're a normal human being with functional priorities. What your parents did wasn't a hard decision with no clear right answer. It was a choice to prioritize your brother's wants over your basic needs. That's not love, Elena. That's favoritism. Favoritism. Another word I'd been afraid to use. Even in my own thoughts, by Sunday evening, I was officially moved into my new apartment. My room was smaller than what I'd had before, but it felt bigger somehow. Maybe because I knew no one could take it away from me without my knowledge. Maybe because I was sharing this space with someone who'd responded to my crisis, with action rather than lectures. We should celebrate, Mija announced as we collapsed on our new living room couch, a sectional she'd bought that was bigger and more comfortable than anything I'd ever owned. Pizza and wine? I don't really drink, I said. More for me than... What's your story with alcohol? Religious thing? Health thing? Control thing? I appreciated that she asked directly rather than making assumptions. Money thing, mostly. And I guess I've always felt like I needed to stay clear-headed in case my family needed something. Right, she said. The always-on-call daughter thing. We're going to work on that. Over pizza from a place that delivered surprisingly good deep dish, Mija told me about her own family drama. She'd grown up in Atlanta with parents who divorced messily when she was 16, each using their children as weapons against the other. The constant manipulation and guilt trips had finally driven her to cut contact with both parents when she was 22. Best decision I ever made, she said, twirling cheese around her fork. I went through about 6 months of feeling guilty and wondering if I was a terrible person. But then I realized something. The people who really love you don't make you choose between your well-being and their approval. But they're still my family, I said. They're not bad people. They just made a bad decision. Maybe, Mija said. but pattern recognition is important. Is this the first time they've prioritized your brother over you? I thought about that question as I ate my pizza. The honest answer was no. Mateo had always been the favorite, not in dramatic, obvious ways, but in small, consistent ones. He got away with breaking rules that would have gotten me in serious trouble. His achievements were celebrated more enthusiastically than mine. His problems were solved quickly and quietly, while mine were treated as learning opportunities. It's not the first time, I admitted. Then this isn't about one bad decision, Nia said. This is about a pattern of behavior that's been going on your whole life. The only difference is that now the stakes are high enough for you to notice. That week, I threw myself into work with a focus I hadn't felt in months. Without the constant stress of impending eviction, I could concentrate on building my freelance business. I reached out to former professors, applied for design competitions, and updated my portfolio with recent projects. One of my former instructors, Professor Radley from my advanced design courses, responded to my email within hours. Elena, I was just thinking about you. I have a client who's looking for a freelance designer for a long-term project. Are you available for contract work? The project was a rebrand for a nonprofit organization that provided educational resources to immigrant families. It was exactly the kind of work I'd always wanted to do, meaningful, community-focused, well-paying. The initial contract was for 3 months, with the possibility of extension. The pay is $35 an hour, Professor Radley explained when we met for coffee. 20 hours a week guaranteed, with the potential for full-time if the project expands. $35 an hour. 20 hours a week. That was $2,800 a month, just from this one project. More than I've been making from both my part-time jobs combined. I'll take it, I said immediately. Don't you want to know more about the scope of work? I'll take it, I repeated. Professor Radley smiled. You always were decisive. That's good. This client needs someone who can work independently and meet tight deadlines. When can you start? Tomorrow? That evening, I called my supervisor at the community college to give notice. Then I called the marketing firm and reduced my hours to just 1 day a week, enough to maintain the connection in case the nonprofit project didn't work out, but not so much that it would interfere with my new opportunity. For the first time in months, I felt like I was moving forward instead of just surviving. But my family had other ideas. The phone calls started on Wednesday. First, Mom checking to see how I was adjusting to my temporary living situation. Then Dad asking if I needed help moving my things. Then Mateo wondering if I wanted to grab lunch and catch up. They were trying to maintain the fiction that nothing fundamental had changed between us. That my eviction and forced relocation were just minor bumps in the road, unrelated to their choice to prioritize his car over my housing. I let the calls go to voicemail. On Thursday, Mom showed up at my old job at the community college. I was in the computer lab, helping an older student navigate Photoshop, when I looked up and saw her standing in the doorway. She looked smaller than I remembered and older. Her work uniform navy blue scrubs from her cleaning job made her look tired in a way that made my chest ache with familiar guilt. Mija, she said when I walked over to her. You haven't been returning my calls. I've been busy with work. With moving, with adjusting to my new life. She looked around the computer lab, taking in the outdated equipment and fluorescent lighting. This place hasn't changed since you were a student here. No, it hasn't. Are you happy here with this job? It was such a loaded question. Was I happy helping adults learn computer skills that could improve their job prospects? Yes. Was I happy making $15 an hour in a job that required an advanced degree? Not particularly. It's good work, I said. You deserve better, she said quietly. You deserve work that matches your education, your talents. I'm working on that. I know you are. You've always been ambitious. Driven. That's why I know you'll be fine through all this. There it was again, the assumption that I'd be fine, that I'd figure it out, that my strength meant I didn't need protection or support. Mom, I said carefully, what if I'm not fine? What if I don't figure it out? She looked genuinely confused by the question. But you always do, Mija. Even when you were little, if something went wrong, you'd find a solution. Remember when your bike got stolen when you were 10? You didn't cry or complain, you just started saving your allowance to buy a new one. I remembered. I also remembered that Mateo had broken his bike the same year, and Dad had immediately bought him a replacement without requiring him to save up or contribute to the cost. What if this time is different? I pressed. What if this time I actually need help? Then you'll ask for it, she said with complete confidence, and we'll be here. But you weren't here, I wanted to say. When I actually needed help, you chose a car over my apartment. When I was facing homelessness, you made a decision that prioritized comfort over necessity. Instead, I just nodded. I should get back to work. Elena, she said as I turned to leave. I love you. You know that, right? I know, and I did know it. That was the part that made everything so much harder. My parents did love me. They just loved me in a way that assumed I could handle anything they put me through. They loved me. Like I was invincible, while they loved Mateo like he was fragile. That night, I told Mija about the visit. She came to your work? Mija asked, pausing in her meal prep. That's intense. She's worried because I haven't been returning calls. Good, let her worry. Maybe if she worries enough, she'll start to understand what she put you through. I don't want her to worry, I said automatically. I just want her to understand that what they did was wrong. Those might be the same thing, Mija pointed out. Sometimes people don't understand the impact of their actions until they experience some consequences. I wasn't ready to think of my silence as a consequence. I was still thinking of it as space room to breathe, to figure out who is when. I wasn't constantly managing everyone else's expectations and needs, but over the next few days, as the calls and texts from my family continued, I started to realize that my absence was having an impact. They were used to me being available, responsive, predictably present in their lives. My sudden unavailability was creating a void they didn't know how to fill. Good, I thought, and immediately felt guilty for thinking that by Friday, I completed my first week of work on the nonprofit project. The organization was called Bridges Educational Alliance, and their mission was to provide tutoring, college prep, and career guidance to first-generation college students and their families. It was meaningful work, and I was good at it. Elena, said Maria Santos, the executive director, during our weekly check-in, the preliminary designs you submitted are exactly what we were hoping for. You've captured both the professionalism we need for grant applications and the warmth we want families to feel when they interact with us. Thank you, I said. I understand the audience because I am the audience. Exactly. That's why this partnership is working so well. You're not designing for an abstract demographic, you're designing for your community. Your community. It was the first time in weeks that someone had acknowledged my identity as something other than the responsible daughter, the overachiever, the one who'd figure it out. That weekend, I declined my family's invitation to Sunday dinner for the second week in a row. Instead, Mija and I explored our new neighborhood, discovering a farmer's market, a used bookstore, and a coffee shop that served the kind of elaborate lattes I'd never been able to afford before. This feels good, I said as we sat outside the coffee shop, watching people walk by with their dogs and strollers and weekend newspapers. What feels good? This, being here. Not having to think about anyone else's needs or expectations or problems. Wild concept, Mija said dryly. Taking care of yourself first. Is that what I'm doing? That's exactly what you're doing. And it looks good on you. I was starting to think she might be right. 3 weeks into my new job with Bridges Educational Alliance, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. I printed business cards with my own name and contact information. Not cards that listed me as a part-time assistant or freelancer, but cards that identified me as Elena Navarro, graphic designer and brand consultant. It was a small thing, but it felt revolutionary. For the first time in my adult life, I was Building something that belonged entirely to me. The nonprofit work was expanding beyond the initial rebrand project. Maria Santos had connected me with other organizations in their network, and word was spreading about my design skills. By the end of March, I had 3 regular clients and a waiting list of potential projects. "You should consider making this official," Professor Radley suggested when we met for our monthly coffee catch-up. "LLC, business bank account, the whole thing. You're not freelancing anymore, you're running a business." The idea thrilled and terrified me in equal measure. Starting my own business felt like a declaration of independence I wasn't sure I was ready to make. But I was making enough money to cover my expenses, save a little each month, and even splurge occasionally on things like good coffee and new clothes. More importantly, I was making those decisions without having to consider anyone else's opinions. Or needs. My family, however, was not adjusting well to my newfound independence. The calls had escalated from concerned to persistent to slightly desperate. Mom was leaving voicemails that ranged from casual check-ins to emotional pleas for me to come home where you belong. Dad, who rarely called me directly, had started texting photos of family dinners with captions like, "Wish you were here, Mija." But it was Mateo's approach that caught me off guard. On a Wednesday evening in early April, he showed up at my apartment unannounced. I was working on a logo design for a community center when the doorbell rang. Mija was at a work event, so I was alone when I opened the door to find my brother standing in the hallway with a bag of takeout from our favorite Mexican restaurant. "Surprise," he said, holding up the food. "I brought dinner." He looked good. I had to admit, the stress of being our parents' primary focus seemed to agree with him. His skin was clear, his hair was perfectly styled, and he was wearing clothes that looked expensive and new. The car situation had apparently boosted more than just his transportation options. "Mateo," I said, not moving to let him in. "What are you doing here? Bringing dinner to my sister." "Is that weird?" "Yes, actually. It's weird to show up at someone's place without calling first." He looked genuinely confused by this boundary. "Since when do I need to call first?" "We're family. Since you cost me my apartment, I thought but didn't say. Since your parents chose your convenience over my basic needs. Since I realized that family can be the most dangerous thing in the world if you let them treat you like you don't matter. Since I moved out and started my own life," I said instead. "Okay," he said slowly. "Can I call next time? Because I'd really like to come in and have dinner with you." There was something different about his toneless, casual confidence, more genuine uncertainty. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let him in. He looked around the apartment with obvious approval. "This place is nice. Way nicer than your old apartment." "The rent's higher," I said. "But I can afford it now." "Yeah, things are going better with work." I explained about the nonprofit contract and the growing client base, watching his face as I described my success. He seemed genuinely happy for me, which made me feel both grateful and suspicious. "That's amazing, Elena. See? I told you you'd figure it out." There it was again, the family motto that placed all responsibility for problem solving on my shoulders. "I didn't just figure it out," I said. "I worked incredibly hard to rebuild my life after it was destroyed." "Destroyed?" He laughed. "Come on, that's a little dramatic. You had a setback with the apartment thing, but look at you now, you're doing better than ever." The apartment thing. As if my near homelessness was just a minor inconvenience, unworthy of dramatic language. "Mateo," I said carefully, "do you know why I had problems with my apartment? Mom said your freelance work slowed down and you got behind on rent. But that happens to everyone sometimes, so they still hadn't told him the truth. They'd let him believe that my financial crisis was just bad luck completely unrelated to their decision to fund his car purchase." I studied my brother's face open, guileless, genuinely concerned about my well-being, and realized I had a choice to make. I could continue protecting him from the truth, maintaining the family fiction that everyone's problems and successes were separate and unrelated. Or I could tell him what actually happened and let him decide how to handle that information. Mateo, I said, Mom and Dad were co-signers on my lease. They'd been helping me pay rent for over a year. When you wanted the car, they stopped contributing to my rent so they could afford your car payment instead. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, understanding, and finally something that looked like horror. That's... double quotes he started, then stopped. They wouldn't... that doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense, I said. You needed a car. I had an apartment. They decided your need was more important than mine. But they didn't tell me that. They said the car payments would come from Dad's overtime pay and Mom's extra shifts. Maybe they worked extra to make up for the money they used to give me. I don't know the details of their budget. I just know that your car cost me my apartment. Mateo sat down heavily on Nia's couch, the takeout bag forgotten in his lap. Elena, I swear to God, I didn't know. If I had known... What would you have done? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I really wanted the car. I'd been wanting it for months, but I never would have wanted you to lose your apartment. But you did want the car more than you wanted to keep living at home and taking the bus, I pointed out. You wanted independence and comfort and status. Those are normal things to want. The problem isn't that you wanted them. The problem is that our parents decided to give them to you at my expense. Maybe I could talk to them, he said. Maybe there's a way to fix this. Fix it how? Sell the car? Move out of their house? Get a full-time job and start paying your own expenses? The suggestions hung in the air between us. We both knew he wasn't going to do any of those things. The car was too perfect, living at home was too comfortable, and part-time work was too easy. I don't know, he said finally, but there has to be something. There is something, I said. You can acknowledge that what happened was wrong. You can stop pretending that my success now somehow justifies what I went through. And you can understand that things are different between us now. Different how? I don't trust our parents to prioritize my well-being over your wants, I said. And I don't trust you to sacrifice anything significant to protect me from their decisions. He flinched like I'd slapped him. That's not fair, isn't it? If they came to you tomorrow and said they needed to sell your car to help me with some financial emergency, would you agree to it? Another long silence. I could see him struggling with the question, trying to find a way to give the right answer without having to make an actual commitment. I hope I would, he said finally. But you're... Not sure. I'm not sure, he admitted. And I hate that I'm not sure. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. We ate our dinner in uncomfortable silence, both of us processing revelations that changed how we understood our family dynamics. When he got ready to leave, Mateo paused at the door. Elena, I'm sorry. Even if I didn't know what was happening, I'm sorry that you went through that. And I'm sorry that I've been so clueless about how hard things have been for you. Thank you, I said. That means something. Are you going to keep avoiding family dinners? For now, yes. Because of me? Because of all of you, I said. Because I need space to figure out who I am when I'm not constantly trying to make everyone else happy. After he left, I called Nia and told her about the conversation. How do you feel? She asked. Sad, I said immediately, and relieved, and angry, and guilty for being angry. That's a lot of feelings. Yeah, but mostly sad, because I think this is the end of something. Not my relationship with my family, necessarily, but the version of my relationship with them that I've been trying to maintain my whole life. The version where you pretend everyone's needs matter equally. The version where I pretend I don't need anything from them. That weekend, I took another step toward independence. I opened a business bank account for Elena Navarro Design. Having a separate account for my work income felt like drawing a line between my old life and my new one. This money belonged to me, earned through my own skills and effort, untouchable by family emergencies or other people's priorities. I also did something I'd never done before. I bought myself something expensive just because I wanted it. A professional camera that I could use for client work, but that I'd mostly purchased because I'd always wanted to get back into photography. The camera cost $800, exactly the amount Mateo had offered to loan me when I was facing eviction. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, but my growing independence was causing ripple effects in my family that I hadn't anticipated. On Sunday evening, as I was editing photos I'd taken around the neighborhood, my phone rang. It was Dad, which was unusual. He rarely called me directly, preferring to communicate through Mom. "Elena," he said, his voice heavy with an emotion I couldn't identify. "Your mother is very upset." "About what?" "About you. About the distance. She thinks you're angry with us." "I am angry with you," I thought. "But I'm also trying to build a life that doesn't revolve around managing your feelings about my anger." "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," I said. "I'm just trying to take care of myself." "But you're not coming to family dinners. You're not returning calls. Your mother feels like she's losing you." "Dad," I said, "when I was about to lose my apartment, where was this concern? When I was facing homelessness, where was this urgent need to maintain our connection?" Silence. "Then, that was different." "How was it different?" "That was about money. This is about family." "Money is about family when it's the difference between having a home and not having a home," I said. "You can't separate those things. Elena, we hoped you'd understand. We thought you were strong enough to handle the situation." I was strong enough. But being strong enough to handle something doesn't mean I should have to. Being capable of surviving your bad decisions doesn't make those decisions okay. Another long pause. "What do you want from us?" It was such a simple question, but I realized I didn't have a simple answer. What did I want? An apology? A promise that it would never happen again? Acknowledgement that their decision had been wrong? "I want you to understand that when you prioritize Mateo's wants over my basic needs, you damage something between us," I said. "I want you to understand that Elena will figure it out isn't a justification for letting me struggle. And I want you to understand that independence isn't something you give someone by withdrawing support. It's something you build together by providing the foundation they need to succeed." "We always supported your independence," Dad protested. "You supported my independence when it was convenient for you," I corrected. "When it meant you could feel proud of your successful daughter without having to continue investing in her success. But the moment my independence conflicted with Mateo's desires, you chose him. He needed help. I needed help too. I just needed a different kind of help." When we hung up, I felt emotionally drained, but also oddly clear. I was starting to understand something important. My family's love for me was real, but it was conditional. They loved me as long as I was strong, successful, and undemanding. They loved the version of me that made them proud, without requiring ongoing investment or difficult choices. But I was learning to love a different version of myself, the version that had needs. That deserved protection, that was worthy of prioritization. It was a harder love, more complicated and demanding. But it was also more honest. That week, I made another decision that felt like stepping into a new version of myself. I hired a lawyer to help me establish my business properly. Elena Navarro Design was becoming real, official, legitimate. "You're thinking about this the right way," the lawyer, Ms. Chun, told me during our consultation. "Building proper structures from the beginning will save you headaches later." As I signed the papers to create my LLC, I thought about all the times I dreamed of running my own business, but convinced myself I wasn't ready. Wasn't qualified, wasn't strong enough to handle the risks. My family's crisis had forced me to discover resources and capabilities I didn't know I had. Maybe that was the real irony. Their betrayal had set me free to become the person I'd always wanted to be. I just wish the price hadn't been so high. 2 months after I'd stopped attending family dinners, I got a call that changed everything I thought I knew about my parents' financial decisions. It was Mateo, and his voice was shaky in a way I'd never heard before. "Elena, you need to come to the hospital." "It's Mom." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "She collapsed at work. They think it might be her heart." All my anger and hurt evaporated instantly, replaced by the kind of pure terror that only comes when someone you love is in danger. Which hospital? University of Chicago Medical Center. Elena, can you come? I'm scared. I was already grabbing my keys. I'm on my way. The drive to the hospital felt endless, even though it only took 20 minutes. I kept thinking about the last conversation I'd had with Mom, how I'd been so focused on making my point about their financial priorities that I'd barely listened to what she was actually saying. What if something happened to her and our last real conversation had been an argument? I found Mateo in the cardiac unit waiting room, looking younger and more frightened than I'd seen him since we were kids. He jumped up when he saw me and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. The doctors are running tests, he said. Dad's with her now, but they'll only let one family member in at a time. What happened exactly? She was cleaning an office building downtown around midnight. Her supervisor found her sitting on the floor, saying her chest hurt and she couldn't catch her breath. The ambulance brought her here. I sat down next to him, my mind racing. Has she been having symptoms? Chest pain, shortness of breath, anything. Like that? I don't know, Mateo said, and he sounded miserable about it. She never complains about being tired or sick. You know how she is? I didn't know how she was. Mom was the kind of person who worked through illness, who downplayed pain, who would never admit to needing medical attention unless she was literally unable to function. Mateo, I said slowly, how long has she been working the night shift? I don't know. A few months, maybe? She said the pay was better. Better pay? Night shift cleaning work typically paid an extra $1 or $2 per hour, hardly enough to justify the strain on someone's body unless they desperately needed the money. Dad emerged from Mom's room looking haggard and older than his 51 years. When he saw me, his face crumpled with relief. Elena and Mija, thank God you're here. How is she? Stable. They think it was a panic attack combined with exhaustion, not a heart attack. But they want to keep her for observation, run some more tests. Can I see her? In a few minutes. She's sleeping now. I sat with Dad and Mateo in the uncomfortable waiting room chairs, surrounded by the antiseptic smell and fluorescent lighting of the hospital. It was the first time the three of us had been together since my eviction crisis, but the circumstances made our family tensions feel petty and unimportant. Dad, I said after a while, why is Mom working night shifts? He rubbed his face with his hands. The extra money helps. Helps with what? Dad and Mateo exchanged a glance that made my stomach clench with dread. Dad, I pressed, what's going on? Another long pause. Then, your mother has been having some health problems. Nothing serious, he added quickly, seeing my expression. But the doctor visits, the tests, the medications, ... Our insurance doesn't cover everything. Medical debt. The possibility hadn't even occurred to me when I'd been so focused on their choice to prioritize Mateo's car over my rent. What kind of health problems? I asked. High blood pressure, some issues with her thyroid, possible diabetes. The doctors are still figuring it out. But the co-pays and the blood work and the specialist visits, it adds up. How much debt are we talking about? Elena, Dad said quietly, you don't need to worry about this. How much? He looked at Mateo again then. Back at me. About $8,000. $8,000. I thought about my parents' household income. Dad's factory job brought in maybe $45,000 a year. Mom's cleaning work added another $25,000. $8,000 in medical. Debt on a $70,000 annual income was crushing. Is that why you stopped helping? With my rent? I asked. Because of Mom's medical bills? Partly, Dad admitted. But we also thought, we hoped, that I'd figure it out. That you were in a position to handle independence better than Mateo was. I stared at him, trying to process this new information. My parents hadn't just chosen to prioritize my brother's desires over my needs. They'd been making impossible financial choices while dealing with a health crisis they hadn't told me about. Why didn't you tell me about Mom's health problems? Because you were already struggling, Dad said. Because we didn't want to add to your stress. Because we thought we could handle it on our own. The familiar pattern, protecting me by hiding. Things from me making decisions about my life without including me in the information I needed to understand those decisions. And the car? I asked. How does Mateo's car fit into this? Dad looked uncomfortable. We thought if Mateo had reliable transportation, he could work more hours, maybe help more with expenses. Is that what happened? Is he working more hours? Silence. Dad, is Mateo contributing more to household expenses now that he has the car? He's still figuring out his schedule. Of course he was. A nurse came to tell us that Mom was awake and asking for family. I went in first, leaving Dad and Mateo in the waiting room. Mom looked small in the hospital bed, connected to monitors that beeped softly in the background. Her hair was pulled back in a way that made her face look gaunt, and her skin had a grayish tinge that scared me. Mija, she said when she saw me, her voice weak but warm. You came. Of course I came. I was worried you wouldn't. I know you're angry with us. I pulled a chair close to her bed and took her hand. It felt fragile, smaller. Then I remembered, Mom, why didn't you tell me you were sick? I'm not sick, she said automatically. Just some minor issues. Nothing to worry about. Dad told me about the medical bills. Her face tightened. He shouldn't have. That's not your burden to carry. Maybe it's not my burden, I said, but it explains a lot about the decisions you've been making. She closed her eyes. Elena, we never wanted you to know how tight things were. We wanted you to focus on building your life, not worry about our problems, but our problems are connected, I said. When you need money for medical bills, and you're also trying to help Mateo with a car, and you're also helping me with rent, those decisions affect each other. You can't pretend they're separate. We thought we could manage everything, but you couldn't. And instead of asking for help or explaining the situation, you just cut off my support and hoped I'd be okay. She opened her eyes and looked at me with an expression of such sadness that I almost started crying. We failed you, she said quietly. We were trying to protect everyone, and we ended up protecting no one. It was the closest to an apology I'd gotten from either of my parents. Mom, I said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. She nodded. When you decided to stop helping with my rent, how much did you really think about what would happen to me? She was quiet for a long time. We thought you were strong enough to handle it. We thought you'd find a way. Did you think about me being evicted? About me being homeless? We thought. We hoped you'd come home if things got too difficult. We thought maybe it would be good for you to move back for a while, save money, be close to family. You thought it would be good for me to lose my independence and move back into my childhood bedroom. We thought it would be temporary. I sat back in my chair, finally understanding the full scope of their thinking. They hadn't seen my eviction as a catastrophic failure on their part. They'd seen it as a reasonable outcome that might actually benefit me in the long run. In their minds, forcing me to move home would strengthen family bonds while saving everyone money. They'd been playing chess with my life, and I'd been the only one who didn't know the game was happening. Mom, I said, I understand that you were dealing with a lot of stress and making hard choices, but I need you to understand something too. When you make decisions about my life without including me in the information, I need to understand those decisions. You're not protecting me. You're controlling me. She looked confused. We never wanted to control you, but that's what happened. You decided I was strong enough to handle eviction. You decided I'd be fine moving back home. You decided my needs were less important than Mateo's wants. You made all those decisions without asking me what I thought or what I needed or what I wanted. We're your parents, she said. It's our job to make decisions. I'm 24 years old. It's my job to make decisions about my own life. Your job is to give me the information and support I need to make good decisions. She closed her eyes again, looking exhausted. I don't know how to do that. What do you mean? I don't know. How? Just stop being your mother and start being whatever comes next. It was such an honest admission that I felt my anger soften into something more complicated. You don't have to stop being my mother, I said. But maybe you could start being the kind of mother who trusts her daughter to handle difficult information and make her own choices. When I left Mom's room, I found Dad and Mateo in the hallway, clearly having had their own difficult conversation. Elena, Mateo said as soon as he saw me, I want to sell the car. What? I want to sell the car and use the money to help with Mom's medical bills and to pay you back for what happened with your apartment. I looked at Dad, who was nodding. Slowly, it's his decision, Dad said. But I think it's the right one. Mateo, I said, you don't have to. Yes, I do, he interrupted. I've been thinking about what you said about whether I'd sacrifice something significant to protect you. And I realize that as long as I'm driving around in a car that cost you your home, I'm not the kind of person I want to be. It was the most mature thing I'd ever heard him say. What will you do for transportation? Take the bus, ask for rides, figure it out. He smiled ruefully. Isn't that the family motto? Despite everything, I laughed up, but selling the car wouldn't solve the underlying problem. The pattern of financial secrecy and unilateral decision-making that had created this crisis in the first place. If we're going to move forward as a family, I said, looking at both Dad and Mateo, we need to start being honest with each other about money, about health, about needs and wants, and priorities. No more protecting each other by hiding important information. No more making decisions that affect everyone without including everyone. That sounds scary, Dad admitted. It is scary, I agreed. But it's less scary than finding out that the people you love have been making decisions about your life behind your back. That night, I stayed at the hospital until visiting hours ended. As I drove home to my apartment that I could afford on my own, that no one could take away from me without warning, I thought about how much had changed in the space. Of a few hours, my family wasn't evil or malicious. They were just flawed people making imperfect decisions under pressure, trying to protect everyone and ending up protecting no one. They'd been playing a game none of us knew how to win. But now, maybe we could learn to play a different game. One where honesty mattered more than protection, where trust mattered more than control, where everyone got to participate in decisions that affected their lives. It wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in months, it felt possible. The week following Mom's hospitalization became a crash course in family financial planning and long overdue honesty. For the first time in my life, I was included in the real conversations about money, health, and priorities. We gathered at the kitchen table where I'd done homework throughout my childhood, but this time the papers spread across the surface weren't school assignments. They were medical bills, insurance statements, budget spreadsheets, and loan documents. Dad had brought a calculator that looked like it belonged in 1995, and Mom, still pale but determined to participate, had organized everything into neat piles with Post-it note labels. Okay, I said, looking at the financial landscape of my family's. Life laid out before me. Let's start with the medical debt. $8,000, spread across how many providers? Mom consulted her list. 4 different doctors, plus the lab work, plus 2 emergency room visits I had to make before we figured out what was going on. And what's the timeline on these bills? Are any of them in collections? Not yet, Dad said. But we've been making minimum payments on some and missing others entirely. I pulled out my laptop and opened a spreadsheet. Let's create a real budget. Income first, Dad. What's your monthly take home from the factory? For the next 3 hours, we built a comprehensive picture of my family's financial reality. It was sobering but not hopeless. With some strategic planning and everyone contributing according to their abilities, we could manage the medical debt and create a more sustainable financial future. The key word being everyone. Mateo, I said, turning to my brother, who'd been unusually quiet during our financial autopsy. You mentioned wanting to sell the car. Are you serious about that? I think so, he said, then caught himself. I mean, yes, I am serious. but I also don't know anything about selling cars or what it's worth or how to handle the loan. The loan is the complicating factor, I agreed. You probably owe more than the car is worth right now, which means selling it might not generate cash to help with other expenses. Dad looked confused. I thought cars were investments. Cars are depreciating assets, I explained. They lose value the moment you drive them off the lot. A $42,000 car is probably worth about $35,000 now, but the loan balance is still close to the full purchase price. The reality of underwater car loans was clearly not something any of them had considered when making the purchase decision. So selling the car wouldn't actually help with Mom's medical bills? Mateo asked. It would help by eliminating the monthly payment, I said. That's $680 a month that could go toward other expenses instead. But you'd still need to come up with money to pay off the difference between what you owe and what the car sells for. How much difference are we talking about? Probably around $5,000 to $7,000. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of financial reality. But, I continued, there might be other options. Mateo, what if instead of selling the car, you used it to actually increase your income? Get a full-time job that requires reliable transportation, maybe even something like rideshare driving or delivery work that turns the car into a money-making tool instead of just an expense? His face lit up. I could do that. Actually, I've been thinking about getting more serious about work anyway. And I added, looking at both parents, what if we all committed to radical honesty about money going forward? No more secret support. No more surprise withdrawals of support. No more financial decisions that affect other family members without including them in the conversation. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. That sounds reasonable in theory, Mom said slowly. But what if there are situations where someone needs help but doesn't want to ask for it? Then we create systems for offering help without being secretive about it, I said. We have monthly family financial check-ins. We share information about big decisions before making them. We ask questions instead of making assumptions. And what about your situation? Dad asked. Do you need help now? Want help? It was the first time either parent had directly asked about my current financial situation rather than just assuming I'd figured everything out. Right now, I'm doing well, I said honestly. My business is growing, I can cover my expenses, and I'm even saving money. But it would be nice to know that if something unexpected happened, I could ask for help without it being seen as a failure on my part. You can always ask for help, Mom said. Can I? Because a few months ago, I was facing homelessness and you didn't offer help, you offered lectures about strength and responsibility. She winced. You're right, I think. I think we were so proud of your independence that we didn't want to undermine it by offering help you didn't specifically ask for. But I shouldn't have to ask for help to avoid homelessness, I pointed out. That should be automatic family support. You're right, Dad agreed. We made some bad assumptions about what you needed and what you could handle. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd gotten from him. So going forward, I said, let's agree that housing, food, medical care, and education are automatic family support priorities. Everything else is negotiable based on resources and circumstances. Everyone nodded. And, I continued, let's agree that major financial decisions get discussed as a family before they're made. Not because everyone gets veto power over everyone else's choices, but because financial decisions in one part of the family affect everyone else. That makes sense, Mateo said. I wish we'd done that before I got the car. I probably would have made a different choice if I'd known about Mom's medical bills. Would you really? I asked, genuinely curious. He thought about it. I think so. I mean, I still would have wanted a car, but maybe not such an expensive one. Maybe a reliable used car instead of a brand new sports car. It was progress. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking constantly about family dynamics and financial boundaries. My relationship with my parents was evolving from child parent to adult, but none of us quite knew how to navigate that transition. I also found myself thinking about Nia's approach to family relationships. She cut contact with her parents because they'd been unwilling to change patterns that were damaging to her well-being. I didn't want to go that route with my family, but I also couldn't go back to the old patterns of financial secrecy and unilateral decision-making. It sounds like you're trying to train them to have healthier relationships, Nia observed when I described the Family Financial Summit. That's exhausting work, but it's working, I said. I think they're actually listening and engaging instead of just dismissing my concerns. Because your mom ended up in the hospital, Nia pointed out. Crisis has a way of making people more open to change. The question is whether they'll maintain this openness once the crisis passes. She was right to be skeptical. Change is hard, and families have a way of reverting to old patterns once the immediate pressure is off. But I was determined to build on the momentum while I had it. The breakthrough came when Maria Santos at Bridges Educational Alliance offered me an opportunity. That would change everything. Elena, she said during our weekly check-in, I've been talking to the board about your work with us, and we'd like to make you an offer. My heart started beating faster. What kind of offer? A full-time position as Director of Communications and Community Engagement. Salary benefits, the whole package. You'd be responsible for all our visual communications, plus managing our social media presence and community outreach programs. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside I was screaming with excitement. What's the salary range? We're prepared to offer $65,000 annually, plus health insurance, retirement contribution, and 3 weeks paid vacation to start. $65,000. It was more money than I'd ever imagined making, especially doing work that felt meaningful and aligned with my values. When would you need an answer? Take your time. This is a big decision. But, Elena, I want you to know that this offer is based on the exceptional work you've already done with us. You've earned this opportunity. I drove home in a daze trying to process what had just happened. 6 months ago, I've been facing eviction and working 2 part-time jobs that barely covered my expenses. Now I was being offered a full-time position that would provide financial security and career advancement. When I got home, Nia was in the kitchen making dinner. You look like someone who just got very good news, she said, looking up from her cutting board. I told her about the job offer. Elena, that's amazing. Are you going to take it? I think so. I mean, yes, definitely yes. But it feels too good to be true. Why? Because 6 months ago, I was a disaster. I was financially unstable, living with family financial support. I didn't even know about and completely dependent on other people's decisions for my basic security. How did I go from that to this? Nia set down her knife and looked at me seriously. You went from that to this because losing everything forced you to discover resources you didn't know you had. Your family's betrayal was terrible, but it also liberated you from a system that was keeping you small and dependent. You think their betrayal was good for me? I think their betrayal revealed that the system you were living in wasn't sustainable, she said. You were successful within their framework, but their framework required you to be grateful for scraps and never ask for what you actually deserved. When that framework collapsed, you had to build a new one, and the new one is better. She was right. The job offer wasn't just about money. It was about being valued for my skills and contributions, about having a voice in decisions that affected my work, about building something meaningful instead of just surviving. That evening, I called my family to share the news. Mija, that's wonderful, Mom said, and for the first time in months, she sounded genuinely happy rather than worried. We're so proud of you. Thanks, Mom. And I wanted to tell you that once I start the new job, I'll be in a position to help with family expenses if needed. Not regularly, not as a primary contributor, but in emergencies or for specific needs. Elena, you don't have to. I want to, I interrupted. But I want us to be clear about expectations and boundaries. If I help with something, it's because I choose to help, not because I'm obligated to help. And if I can't help with something, that's also okay. That sounds fair, Dad said. And I continued, I want everyone to understand that this job offer happened because I was free to focus on building my career without worrying about family financial crises or managing everyone else's expectations. Independence isn't just good for me, it's good for all of us. We understand, Mom said. And Elena, we're sorry we didn't understand that before. It was the apology I'd been waiting for. That night, I sat in my apartment, the apartment I'd chosen, that I could afford, that no one could take away from me, and drafted my acceptance letter for the director position at Bridges Educational. A line stopped as I wrote, I thought about the young woman I'd been 6 months ago. Hardworking but financially precarious. Devoted to family but unaware of how one-sided that devotion was. Successful but dependent on support systems that could disappear. Without warning. That woman had been admirable in many ways, but she'd also been living in a house of cards. When the cards fell, she'd discovered she was strong enough to build something more solid. The new job wouldn't just provide financial security, it would provide the foundation for a life where I could choose to help my family from a position of strength rather than being forced to depend on their decisions for my basic survival. It felt like the beginning of everything I always wanted but hadn't known how to ask for. The day I started my new job at Bridges Educational Alliance was also the day my family held what we decided to call our financial family meeting number 2. The timing felt symbolic. I was beginning a new chapter of professional independence. Just as we were all committing to a new model of family interdependence. My first day at work was everything I'd hoped it would be. I had my own office with a window, a budget for design software and professional development, and a team of colleagues who treated me like an expert rather than an assistant. When Maria Santos introduced me to the board as their new director of communications and community engagement, I felt a surge of pride that was entirely my own. Elena will be leading our rebrand rollout and developing our new community outreach strategy, Maria explained. She brings both professional expertise and lived experience to this work, which makes her uniquely qualified to help us serve our community more effectively. Lived experience. For the first time, my background as a first-generation college student from an immigrant family was being treated as an asset rather than something to overcome or move beyond. After work, I drove to my parents' house for our family meeting. As I parked in front of the modest home where I'd grown up, I noticed Mateo's red Camaro was conspicuously absent from the driveway. Inside, I found my family gathered around the kitchen table with a laptop, a printer, and several legal-looking documents spread across the surface. Elena, Mom said, standing to hug me. She looked healthier than she had since her hospital visit, with color back in her cheeks and energy in her movements. How was your first day? Amazing, I said honestly. Better than I'd hoped. Tell us everything, Mateo said, gesturing for me to sit down. I want to hear about your fancy new job. As I described my day, the office, the projects, the team, the feeling of being valued for my contributions, I watched my family's faces. They looked genuinely proud, but also slightly awed, as if they were seeing me clearly for the first time. $65,000, Dad said, shaking his head. Mija, you're making more than I am. The money is great, I said, but honestly, the best part is feeling like I'm building something meaningful instead of just surviving. That's how I felt when I first got my job at the sneaker store, Mateo said, then caught himself. I mean, obviously it's not the same level, but there's something about earning your own money that feels different than just receiving it. Speaking of earning money, I said, noticing his absence of transportation, where is your car? Sold it, he said with a grin. 3 days ago. Got $34,000 for it, which was enough to pay off the loan with about $2,000 left over. I was genuinely surprised. You actually went through with it. I actually went through with it. And you know what? I don't miss it as much as I thought I would. Turns out public transportation is pretty convenient when you're not too proud to. Use it. What did you do with the extra money? Gave it to Mom and Dad for medical bills, he said. And I used the money I was saving from not having car payments to get a different kind of wheels. He gestured toward the window, where I could see a bicycle leaning against the front porch. A bike? A really nice bike. Good for commuting, good for exercise, good for the environment. And it cost $300 instead of $42,000. I was impressed despite myself. What about work? How are you getting to your job? That's the thing, Mateo said, his excitement obvious. I quit the sneaker store and got a full-time job at a nonprofit that provides bike maintenance and safety, training to kids in underserved communities. The pay is better, the work is meaningful, and they have a bike-friendly commute policy. Mateo, that's incredible. It gets better, he said. The job comes with health insurance, which means I can contribute to family medical expenses by being on my own insurance plan instead of being on mom and dad's. I looked around the table at my family mom beaming with pride, dad nodding approvingly, Mateo glowing with the satisfaction of having made difficult but responsible choices. So what's all this? I asked, gesturing to the documents on the table. Our family financial agreement, Mom said. We spent the week working with a financial counselor to create a written plan for how we'll handle money decisions going forward. She handed me a document titled Navarro Family Financial Cooperation Agreement. It was 3 pages long and covered everything from emergency fund contributions to decision-making processes for major purchases. As I read through it, I was struck by how thorough and thoughtful it was. The agreement established individual financial responsibilities, created a system for voluntary family financial support, and outlined procedures for making financial decisions that might affect other family members. This is really comprehensive. I said, you worked with a professional to create this? The hospital has a financial counseling program, Dad explained. When we went back for Mom's follow-up appointment, they connected us with someone who helps families create sustainable financial plans. And, Mom added, we realized that most of our financial problems came from not having clear agreements about who was responsible for what and how decisions would be made. I kept reading. The agreement included specific provisions about communication, transparency, and mutual support that addressed many of the issues that had led to my eviction crisis. Section 4.2. I read aloud. All family members will be informed of major financial decisions that may affect their living situation, employment, or financial obligations at least 30 days in advance, except in cases of genuine emergency. That's the no more secret cosigner situations clause, Mateo said. And Section 5.1, I continued. Family financial support will be offered voluntarily and accepted voluntarily, with clear terms and expectations communicated upfront. The no more assumptions about who needs what kind of help clause, Dad sighed. I like Section 6, Mom said. The one about monthly check-ins. I found the section she was referring to. Family members commit to monthly conversations about financial status, upcoming expenses, and potential needs for support, creating opportunities for proactive assistance rather than crisis management. You're really going to do monthly family financial meetings? I asked. We're going to try, Mom said. The counselor said that most family financial conflicts come from poor communication rather than actual lack of resources. And, Dad added, we figured out that we actually have more resources than we thought when we all contribute according to our abilities instead of according to old assumptions about who should pay for what. Mateo pulled out a spreadsheet. Want to see the new family budget? The spreadsheet was color-coded and detailed, showing each family member's income, expenses, and contributions to shared costs like Mom's medical bills. It was a far cry from the secretive, assumption-based financial management that had characterized our family for years. Mateo's contributing $400 a month to household expenses now that he has full-time work, Dad explained. Mom's reducing her hours to focus on her health, but her medical costs are manageable with the family contribution system. And I'm picking up some overtime when it's available. What about me? I asked. Where do I fit in this budget? You don't, Mom said. Not as a regular contributor. You're building your own life, your own financial security. But the agreement includes provisions for voluntary contributions to family emergencies and for accepting help if you need it. It was exactly what I'd hoped for a system that recognized my independence while maintaining family connection and mutual support. There's one more thing, Mateo said, looking slightly nervous. We included a section about accountability and conflict resolution. I found the relevant section. If any family member feels that the terms of this agreement are not being followed, they have the right to call a family meeting to address the issue. All family members commit to participating in good faith and working toward resolution. Basically, Dad said, if anyone feels like we're slipping back into old patterns, they can force a conversation about it instead of just suffering in silence or cutting off communication. That's specifically for your benefit, Mom said, looking at me. Because we realize now that you didn't feel like you could challenge our decisions or ask for clarification when things didn't make sense to you. It was such a direct acknowledgement of the power dynamics that had led to our crisis that I felt emotional reading it. And, she continued, we included a section about apologies and accountability. Section 8 was titled, Acknowledgement of Past Harm? It included specific language acknowledging that their financial decisions regarding my apartment had been harmful, that they'd failed to include me in decisions that affected my life, and that they committed to doing better going forward. You didn't have to put that in writing, I said. Yes, we did, Dad said. Because saying sorry isn't enough if we don't also commit to changing the behavior that caused harm in the first place. I set down the document and looked around the table at my family. 6 months ago, I'd been sitting in this same kitchen, feeling betrayed and abandoned. Today, I was looking at people who'd done the hard work of examining their own behavior and committing to change. I have one suggestion, I said. What's that? I think we should all sign this in front of each other, and I think we should schedule our first monthly check-in for next month. Agreed. Mom said we each sign the document, and Dad made copies for everyone. As I folded my copy and put it in my purse, I felt like I was carrying more than just a piece of paper. I was carrying proof that my family was capable of growth, change, and genuine accountability. There's one more thing, Mateo said as we finished up. I wanted to thank you. For what? For not letting us get away with treating you badly. For demanding better from us instead of just accepting what we gave you. For showing us that family love should include respect and consideration, not just good intentions. And, Mom added, for proving that we could have these conversations without destroying our relationships. I was scared that if we talked honestly about money and decision-making, we'd end up fighting and falling apart. Instead, we ended up closer and more functional. Dad said, as I drove home that evening, I thought about the journey from crisis to resolution. 6 months ago, I'd been evicted because my family made financial decisions about my life without including me. Tonight, I'd signed an agreement that ensured something like that could never happen again. But more than that, I discovered something important about myself. I was capable of demanding better treatment without destroying the relationships I valued. I could set boundaries without building walls. I could insist on respect without giving up love. My family had learned something too. That protecting someone and controlling someone aren't the same thing. That good intentions don't justify harmful actions. And that real love includes the willingness to change behavior when that behavior causes harm. It hadn't been easy work for any of us. But it had been necessary work, and it had made us stronger individually and together. That night, I called Mija to update her on the family meeting. They actually created a written agreement? She asked, sounding impressed despite her usual skepticism. About family dynamics, they did. And it addresses all the major issues that led to the crisis in the first place. And you think they'll actually follow it? I think they'll try, I said. And I think I'm in a position now to hold them accountable if they don't, because you have your own financial security. Because I have my own financial security. And because I've learned that I can demand better treatment without feeling guilty about it. That's huge growth, Nia said. 6 months ago, you were so worried about being a burden that you couldn't even advocate for your basic needs. She was right. The woman who'd been evicted 6 months ago had been so grateful for any help that she'd accepted whatever terms came with that help. The woman I was now understood that gratitude and self-respect weren't mutually exclusive. "I've been thinking about something," I said. When my parents made that decision about my rent and Mateo's car, they weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to solve multiple problems with limited resources. They just didn't include me in the problem-solving process. And now? Now, we have a system for solving problems together instead of making decisions about each other. It felt like the difference between being managed and being respected, between being protected and being trusted, between being loved and being valued. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like a full participant in my family rather than just a grateful recipient of their decisions. 1 year later, I was sitting in my office at Bridges Educational Alliance, looking through a stack of business cards I collected at a professional conference, when my phone buzzed with a text from Mateo. "Monthly family meeting tonight. Mom's making pozole. Can you bring dessert?" The ease of that text, casual, expectant, normal, still amazed me sometimes. A year ago, family dinners had been loaded with tension and unspoken resentments. Now they were just ... dinner, with the added benefit of productive conversations. About money, goals, and mutual support. I grabbed my purse and headed out to pick up dessert, taking a moment to appreciate how different my daily routine had become. Instead of rushing between multiple part-time jobs, I had the luxury of leaving work at a reasonable hour. Instead of worrying about whether I could afford groceries, I was debating between the good bakery and the really good bakery. The promotion I'd received 3 months earlier to Senior Director of Community. Engagement had come with another salary increase and expanded responsibilities. I was now overseeing programs that serve thousands of families across Chicago, and my work was being recognized throughout the nonprofit sector. But the professional success, gratifying as it was, wasn't the most significant change in my life. The most significant change was that I'd learned to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than grateful accommodation. At the bakery, I chose a tres leche cake that would serve 6 people, our family plus Nia, who'd become a regular attendee at monthly meetings since she and Mateo had started dating. Their relationship had been one of the unexpected benefits of our family crisis resolution. Nia's direct communication style had turned out to be exactly what Mateo needed to develop emotional maturity and his genuine efforts to become a better person had impressed her enough to give him a chance. When I arrived at my parents' house, I found the familiar scene of controlled chaos that preceded family dinners. Mom was stirring pozole on the stove while giving Dad instructions about setting the table. Mateo was on the couch with his laptop, updating our family financial spreadsheet. Nia was helping Mom with something that involved a lot of animated gesturing and laughter. "Elena," Mom called out when she saw me. Perfect timing. "How was the conference?" "Productive," I said, in the cake on the counter. "I made some good connections for potential collaborations." "Tell us about it over dinner," Dad said, emerging from the dining room with a stack of plates. "But first, Mateo has news." I looked at my brother, who was grinning in a way that suggested his news was significant. "What kind of news?" "The good kind," he said. "I got promoted to program coordinator at work, and Nia and I found an apartment." "You're moving out?" I asked, genuinely surprised. Mateo had been living at home for so long that I'd started to think it was a permanent arrangement. "We're moving out," Nia corrected, appearing at his side. "Together." We found a place in Albany Park that's close to both our jobs and affordable on our combined income. "That's huge," I said, hugging them both. "When's the move?" "Next month," Mateo said. Which brings us to the first item on tonight's meeting agenda: adjusting the family budget to account for Mateo not contributing to household expenses anymore. The fact that my 22-year-old brother was thinking proactively about the financial impact of his life decisions on the rest of the family was, perhaps, the most dramatic change that had occurred over the past year. Over dinner, we talked through the practical implications of Mateo's move. With his monthly contribution gone, Mom and Dad would need to adjust their budget slightly, but they'd also have reduced household expenses. More importantly, Mateo's move represented his successful transition to full financial independence, a goal we'd all been working toward. "I'm proud of you," Mom said to Mateo as we discussed the logistics. "A year ago, you were completely dependent on us for housing and transportation. Now you're supporting yourself and building a life with someone you love." "I learned from the best," Mateo said, looking at me. Elena showed all of us what independence actually looks like. It was a generous acknowledgement, but not entirely accurate. "I think we all learned together," I said. "I learned to advocate for myself. You learned to take responsibility for yourself. And Mom and Dad learned to support us without controlling." Speaking of support," Dad said, "your mother and I have been talking about our next steps." "What kind of next steps?" "Financial ones," Mom said. "With Mateo moving out and my health stable, we're in a position to start building an emergency fund and maybe even think about retirement planning." "That's great," I said. "Do you need help finding a financial advisor?" "Actually," Dad said, "we were hoping you might have time to help us research our options. You're so good with planning and organization." It was the kind of request that, a year ago, would have made me feel obligated to say yes regardless of my own schedule and priorities. Now I considered it carefully. "I can help you get started," I said. "I can research some options and maybe come with you to initial consultations." "If you want, but I think it would be good for you to develop your own relationship with a financial advisor rather than having me be the intermediary." "That makes sense," Mom agreed. "We're still learning to handle our own business instead of depending on you to manage things for us." The conversation moved on to other topics: Nia's latest marketing campaign, Dad's considerations about taking early retirement, my upcoming presentation at a national conference. It was the kind of dinner conversation I'd always imagined having with my family, but had never quite achieved. Honest, supportive, and focused on everyone's growth rather than crisis management. After dinner, as we cleaned up and prepared for the official monthly meeting portion of the evening, I found myself reflecting on how much trust we'd all built over the past year. The monthly meetings had become a safe space for discussing concerns, celebrating successes, and maintaining the transparency we committed to. "Okay," Mateo said, pulling out his laptop and opening our shared financial spreadsheet. "Monthly. Check-in time. Everyone ready?" We went through our established agenda: individual financial updates, upcoming expenses or opportunities, requests for support or advice, and evaluation of how well we were maintaining our agreement. "I have something to share," I said when it was my turn. "I've been thinking about buying a condo." The room went quiet. Home ownership felt like a major milestone, worthy of family input. "Tell us about it," Mom said. "There's a 2-bedroom place in Logan Square that I've been looking at. It's in my price range, especially with the raise. I'd still have a roommate, probably Mija, until she moves in with Mateo, but I'd be building equity instead of just paying rent." "That sounds like a smart investment," Dad said. "Do you need help with a down payment?" "I don't think so," I said. "I've been saving aggressively since I started the new job. But I wanted to run the numbers by everyone and get your thoughts on the decision." For the next hour, we analyzed the financial implications of homeownership, discussed the pros and cons of different neighborhoods, and talked through my long-term goals. It was exactly the kind of collaborative decision-making process I'd wished for during my apartment crisis. "I think you should go for it," Nia said finally. "You're financially stable, you know what you want, and you've proven that you can handle major life decisions responsibly." "I agree," Mom said. "But, Elena, I want you to know that if anything unexpected happens, job loss, medical emergency, major repair costs, you can ask for help without feeling like you're failing." "I know," I said. "And I want you to know that I'm in a position to help if any of you face unexpected expenses. Not as a regular thing, but in genuine emergencies." It was a conversation that would have been impossible a year ago when financial support was complicated by issues of control, obligation, and unspoken expectations. Now it was just practical planning among adults who cared about each other. As the evening wound down and people started heading home, Mateo pulled me aside. "Elena, can I ask you something?" "Of course." Do you think we would have figured all this out eventually, even without the crisis with your apartment? I thought about it. Honestly, I don't think so. I think we all would have continued in the same patterns, me being grateful for whatever support I received. You being comfortable with support you hadn't really earned. Mom and dad making decisions for us instead of with us. So, in a weird way, the worst thing that happened to you was also the best thing that happened to all of us. I wouldn't go that far, I said. The eviction and financial crisis were genuinely harmful, and I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone. But the work we did to rebuild our relationships after that crisis, that's been one of the best things that's happened to me. To all of use, Mateo corrected. I'm a better person now than I was a year ago. More responsible, more aware of how my decisions affect other people, more grateful for the support I receive. And I'm more confident about advocating for myself, I said. More willing to set boundaries, more comfortable with success. And mom and dad are better at treating us like adults instead of children they need to protect or manage. It was hard work, I reflected. Learning to have honest conversations about money and expectations and needs. Learning to see each other as full people instead of just family roles. But worth it. Definitely worth it. As I drove home that night, I thought about the version of myself who'd sat in this same car a year ago, devastated by my family's betrayal and terrified about her future. That woman had been strong, but she'd also been small in her expectations. Small in her sense of what she deserved. Small in her willingness to demand better treatment. The woman I was now wasn't just stronger, she was bigger. In her vision of what was possible, bigger in her sense of her own worth, bigger in her capacity for both independence and healthy interdependence. I'd learned that you can love your family without accepting whatever treatment they give you. That you can be grateful for support without being obligated to accept support that comes with harmful conditions. That independence doesn't mean isolation, and that setting boundaries doesn't mean building walls. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the people who love you most need to see you walk away before they understand how to treat you better. My family's love for me had always been real, but it hadn't always been respectful. Learning to demand respect hadn't diminished their love, it had improved it. A few weeks later, I closed on the condo. The whole family came to the closing, and afterward we celebrated with dinner at the Mexican restaurant where Mateo had brought takeout the night he'd learned the truth about my eviction. To Elena, Dad said, raising his glass of water and a toast, for showing us all what it means to build a life you're proud of. To family, I corrected, raising my own glass, for doing the hard work of learning to love each other better. As we clinked glasses around the table, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with home ownership and everything to do with the relationships we'd rebuilt through honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. I'd lost an apartment, but gained something much more valuable. A family that saw me clearly, supported me genuinely, and respected me completely. It had taken a crisis to get there, but some destinations are worth the difficult journey. 6 months later, when Mija and Mateo got engaged and asked me to help them plan their wedding, I said yes with genuine enthusiasm. When Mom was diagnosed with diabetes and needed help navigating insurance complications, I offered support without resentment. When Dad decided to take early retirement and asked for advice about healthcare options, I shared my research willingly, because that's what family does when everyone's needs matter equally, when support flows in all directions based on capacity. In circumstances, and when love includes respect as a fundamental component, I still keep that eviction notice in my desk drawer, not as a reminder of pain but as proof of resilience. It represents the worst thing that happened to me and the beginning of the best thing I ever did for myself, learning to demand the treatment I deserved and building a life worthy of my own respect. Sometimes losing everything is exactly what you need to discover who you really are. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.